Just hang on, I'm having a few technical difficulties here. So if anyone has any questions, they can just put them in the chat. I am happy to answer pretty much anything you have, as long as, I have the answer and it's not something that would be more appropriate in a different scenario, such as with your clinician. Just sending out a link again so that everybody knows where to find this stream. It is a different link than original. So as I said before, if anybody has questions about misophonia, the purpose of this is just to have a Q&A. You can type them into the chat box on whatever platform that you're using, and I will reply with my voice here. And just as a little introduction, my name is Shaylynn Hayes-Raymond, and I am a counselor in New Brunswick, Canada. I've been an advocate for misophonia for 10 years. I have misophonia, and I am the director of the International Misophonia Foundation. Sorry for all of that kind of word soup. I first became interested in misophonia when I discovered I had it. I did not know there was a name for it at first. This was like 2014, only that it was making my life absolutely miserable. I don't say that as a way for people to not have hope, but just to kind of emphasize how much of an impact that this disorder has had on my own personal life. So I do understand that it's a very challenging condition. It is my hope, though, that research and coping skills can all be beneficial and really make life much easier for persons with misophonia. And I will say that in my own life, I feel like I cope much better now than I did 10 years ago. So I think that that is definitely a win. And a lot of that came from learning coping skills, learning about the disorder and my brain. And of course, scientists are learning at the same time that we are. And It's been a very interesting 10 years, but it also has given me a lot of hope because the research that we've seen in these past 10 years has been very expansive. My apologies for drinking. So I'm just kind of like sending out reminders to people that this is happening right now. And, you know, anything you want to ask, you can ask in the chat. As I've said numerous times, I should be able to answer you live. I should be able to see the multiple chat feeds at once. And it is the plan of the foundation to do these chats more often. So hopefully we will, you know, get on a schedule, be able to provide education, provide answers, and, you know, talk to each other and learn about each other's experiences, because you can even like say in the chat your own experiences and I will definitely read them out. I want this to be kind of a safe space for both parents, clinicians, and people with misophonia. Sorry, I said both and then three things. I feel like I have almost jumbled words today. It's like my brain's just waking up from a fog. But I am happy to be here. I'm happy to provide education. This is definitely a passion of mine. So I guess I'm just gonna like talk about the International Misophonia Foundation. The International Misophonia Foundation was founded by myself, by Amber Lipinoga, who is a licensed social worker in Missouri, by Sharon Burns and Vicky Sladowski, who has now moved on to other projects. And I do suggest looking at Vicky's books. She has a wonderful children's book and coloring book on misophonia that is available on Amazon. Vicky is truly wonderful, and we thank her for her time as a board member and founder. So the International Misophonia Foundation was started as a way to provide an accessible resource of information for clinicians, the public, and even other advocates, other counselors, different spaces. We really wanted to engage in meaningful ways, which is why we currently have a petition to get misophonia in the DSM-6 and the ISD-7. 12. There's so many acronyms in this world. But our main goals are facilitating research studies and surveys on misophonia, misokinesia, and sensory processing. We created an independent review board for misophonia research. We offer our own research through the foundation. We've created an academic journal so that we can also publish these results in an open source way that everybody can access. We are obviously developing live events such as this one. We provide a clinician directory. We provide classes for both clinicians and the public. We had an online conference in May, which in my opinion went very well. We hope to have in-person conferences in the future, but at this time we will stay online just to keep costs low as we start. We want to expand our research goals and fill the gaps in misophonia literature. We would love to contact with other organizations We provide reviews on products that might be helpful for people with misophonia. We want to create and publish translations of these resources so that they're available to a wider public. And we sometimes provide assistive technologies such as headphones, sensory regulation earplugs, and earplugs through donations from the foundation. And we have done so in the past. We have also donated a laptop to a person with misophonia who was a teenager so that they could finish school from a safer environment. So I guess the IMF has a lot of goals, and I'm very passionate about these goals. We're running several research studies right now. We're also running the Petition. I'm going to put our current study in the chat. It is the Treatment Perceptions and Sensory History Study. And I'm also going to find the Petition somewhere. I don't know which page it's on. Sorry. I should have put it on the bar, on the menu, but I realized that I never actually did. So I'm just going to search for it. My apologies. Okay, I found it really quick because my web browser remembered it. So if anybody has any questions, please do put them in the chat. They will be visible on the screen as well, no matter what platform you're on. This is live right now on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, so there are multiple ways to watch. But no matter which platform, it should work in the chat if everything's going right. So please do submit your questions. I'd love to hear them and answer them. So while we wait for questions, I'll just talk, I guess, about the petition and the reasons behind it. Now, I have personally felt a little weird about misophonia being in the DSM, and I think that's because I worried that misophonia would then be seen as a psychological illness. And I think a lot of people are worried that misophonia will be perceived as psychological. So getting misophonia in the DSM-6, it's a hard thing to think about. But I do believe that since conditions like autism and ADHD, which are not classified as mental illnesses, are in the DSM, I think there is room there for misophonia to be in that space. And the petition basically says that there is evidence supporting that misophonia exists. There are clinical implications by having it in a manual. It proves to clinicians that this disorder does exist, and it helps researchers to focus on what matters for misophonia as a disorder. So hopefully it will get us, some traction, because, people like to research disorders that exist, that they can look up. And, we need more research to know what it is. So I think the DSM is a good move, only because they have conditions like autism that are not classified as psychological. If they only had psychological conditions and didn't have autism or ADHD, I would definitely say absolutely no way. But I think we're at a point where for people to take misophonia seriously, for people to get diagnosis and meaningful coping skills from providers, and for providers to be willing to pay for trainings and learn, I think we do have to have legitimacy, and that is what these manuals offer. And it's unfortunate that we have to kind of play politics and have petitions, but I think having this petition is going to show the wider community that we're serious, we exist, please help us. So hopefully that petition, people will sign it and it'll go out there. Thank you for your comment and for saying it's a good idea. I am glad to hear that. I hope that we can get enough signatures that it can be delivered. I do plan to find somebody to deliver the petition in person. I believe they are located in Washington, so we'll have a member of the community in Washington actually deliver a printed out version of this. Or if I have to, I will fly to Washington and do it myself, and I sincerely mean that. Because, why not? It is important. We need to get it there. And if I can't find someone with boots on the ground, I will be those boots on the ground. I'd rather not fly with misophonia, but I will do it if I have to. So, does anyone have any specific questions? I am happy to answer them. I did have a list of questions that was submitted, and I could answer some of those too. But I'd really like some questions in the chat if anybody has them. And I do want to say, please don't put personal details in the chat if possible. We want this to be a safe and confidential space. Except for me, everyone knows who I am, I think, at this point. I've been ranting about misophonia for a long time. And there really isn't a set time for this stream. I was a little late getting it going, which I apologize for, but it should be ready. I can stay for as long as people need. I plan to stream more regularly. They might come up more planned. I might get a set schedule. I don't know. Maybe people can let me know what schedule would work for them. And of course, I will try to be as accommodating as possible. And I'm really just here, to answer any burning questions that anybody has. Can you share the petition? Oh, please do. Please share it wherever you're comfortable with sharing it. The more people, the better. You don't have to ask about any of our stuff. All of it can be shared freely, unless it was the private video for a class or something like that. So does anyone have any other questions about misophonia? Anything specific? As long as it's not, something that I can't answer for either privacy reasons or because it would be better off, with your own practitioner, I will answer whatever I can. I did actually dump a bunch of juice on my keyboard right before this started, so I'm just trying to clean that up a little bit. The whole desk is sticky. It was really bad timing, but oh well. If I weren't clumsy, I wouldn't be me. All right, so we have gone over the petition so far, and I've posted a link to the ongoing misophonia study. Is there anything else that people would like clarity on? Do you have any questions about the petition or the ongoing treatment sensory study? And by the way, that's not a study to provide treatment. It's a study to figure out treatment that people already have received and whether or not they worked. So I am just waiting on any of your questions in the chat. Please don't be shy. You can ask anything you want about misophonia. And I'll be here kind of for the next little while. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30. It depends on how many questions we get. So who can help with misophonia? Can an OT help? Occupational therapy, in my opinion, is quite beneficial as long as it is tailored to misophonia specifically. You want to make sure that the occupational therapist you're using does not have sound listening programs that they want to use, because that can be a bit grating and I don't want to say make misophonia worse, but make it uncomfortable, and it doesn't really work. But the sensory integration and sensory regulation skills that are provided with occupational therapy are also skills that I promote in Misophonia Matters in my approach, both when I do counseling and psychotherapy with clients and when I do coaching worldwide, teaching kind of coping skills for misophonia. So yes, I do think OT can help. An integrative approach of sensory integration, psychoeducation, and advocacy is what I promote in my approach and what I teach and work with clients. I think it's a piece of the puzzle. OTs might not have as many tools to kind of deal with misophonia specifically other than sensory regulation. And I do think that we need the cognitive piece to deal with kind of the very negative emotions that come up because of misophonia. So sensory regulation is a big piece of the puzzle, but I don't think it's the whole picture. But if you have an OT who is like fantastic and understands that, then that can be a great working relationship and is surely better than having no practitioner. I hope I answered your question. Is there anything you want like more clarification on? Please feel free to ask more. I do want to add as a follow-up to that question that we do have a provider network and classes for misophonia. I also offer coping skills myself, but we do have that entire list there. One of the great things is that more and more practitioners are learning about misophonia and are, understanding. We also teach clinicians at the foundation, so I'm very proud of that work because it's great to see that there is a growing need for practitioners and that they're meeting that need by learning how to help people cope with misophonia. Because, as I said, when I started 10 years ago, there was nothing. And now, can you fully heal for it over time? I think like autism or ADHD that you can't necessarily fully heal, but you can learn how to cope and you can learn skills that you can implement in the misophonic moment. And through that, you will have an easier time of getting through your life than if you didn't have the skills. And I want to mention that, some days are going to be worse than others. Some days, even with coping skills, you might be a little down, you might be having a lot of trouble coping, and other days it might be easy. But at this point, there is no evidence of any treatment that will eradicate misophonia completely. I do think that it's a bit of a touch and go thing where we have to always be proactive about coping skills and knowing our boundaries and knowing what our body needs. And I do think that this works a lot. I mean, I went from hiding in my bedroom as a 21-year-old to a married 30-year-old, which I never expected would happen. So I've obviously gotten better at coping with misophonia. And that's just kind of an anecdotal response, but I think learning how to cope, learning how to advocate for yourself, and learning tools for both sensory regulation for the neurophysiological component and cognitive skills for the emotional aftermath. I think that can help alleviate a lot of the suffering from the disorder, but I would not call it a treatment or a cure. And Angela, I see your question. Would a 12-year-old be able to be successful with the coaching sessions? I think anybody can be successful with them so long as they are, at a stage in their lives where they're able to do this. I certainly don't think I would do it with someone, who is 4 years old. There has to be at least a level of understanding, and I think 12 is pretty good for that. It would also depend on your child if you feel like they are the type that would respond to coaching, that they would be willing to listen and learn new skills. And there's certainly an option that the parent can also, read the book too, have the worksheets, and then be able to kind of do touch-up sessions and ensure that they're actually engaging in these sessions. But I do think that 12 is a good age. I wouldn't necessarily go much younger because I think at that point it becomes much harder to understand the psychoeducation and advocacy points. And I think you have to be a lot more basic once you get into young children. And I am more teen and up based. But I do think a 12-year-old could do a coaching session so long as that 12-year-old was willing and open to engage and, enjoys learning, wants to be part of the process. I hope that answered your question. Are noise canceling earphones a good idea? Yes. I have seen no evidence thus far that wearing noise canceling earphones, I'm wearing them right now, and I have white noise playing in them too. I have seen no evidence that it makes misophonia worse. We do have some evidence that for sensory stimuli, being stimulated constantly, it does make it worse. So if there are opportunities where you can eliminate and alleviate triggers, please do. It makes life easier for everybody. It reduces a lot of the fear. And it's a good coping skill, too, to know that you have something to turn to rather than, just sitting there being upset. And I would say, obviously make sure that they're not too loud. You don't want to cause actual damage to their ears. Make sure that the buds are regularly sanitized so that there's no ear infection, stuff like that. So in a practical way, make sure that there's no physical problems. But otherwise, I don't think there's any problem with wearing noise-canceling earbuds or earphones all the time. I have worn them a lot over the past 10 years. I personally do not go out in public without them because it's very hard to ask people in public not to trigger you, if not impossible. So I think utilizing them is a great idea, or even, letting them eat in a different room if that's an option in your household. Everyone's got to eat, so in those cases, that's not one where you want to push the coping skills. You just got to make sure that they're fed as best you can and let go the idea of a perfect meal, in my opinion. If the family dinner is really important to your family, you could try having a loud noise in the room, like a fan or white noise playing on a speaker. Dr. Brout brought up in her classes she used to do that the kitchen fan is really loud and can help. Putting even just a rug in the room that absorbs sound can be helpful. Having the person with misophonia kind of sit in a corner of the table off to their own, where they're still there, but they're not in the thick of it. And I guess you will have to kind of ask your 11-year-old too what they prefer. They might want to eat dinner with you. They might think that if they have to go somewhere else, that's really sad. So I think it's also important for coping to think of the emotional aspect and your family values and come up with an answer that's suitable for everybody involved. I hope that answer helped, Edel. Or I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. Either way, I hope that answer was at least somewhat helpful. So if anyone has more questions, I am happy to answer. And yeah, as I said during that question, I'm actually wearing these right now. Oh, like Adele. These ones I actually got for $70 on Amazon. They're called Soundpeats, and they're honestly better than the $300 ones I own, which is kind of weird. This is not an ad. I'm not sponsored by Soundpeats by any measure, but they work wonderful, and they're also one of the cheapest on the market, so that is definitely a plus. I don't know why, but their noise canceling works even better than my Samsung ones. And I've had these ones for, I think, 5 years, and they're still working perfectly. And then I ended up buying new ones because I love them so much. So if anyone has more questions, I am more than happy to answer in the chat. Just one sec. I'm trying to find a link to those earbuds. Oh, they're actually on sale with coupon. So instead of $70 or $80, they're now $50. So that's even better. And obviously you do not have to buy them, but here is the link. That is the link to their cheaper ones. They also have ones that are $99. I actually own both. I own an older version of the cheaper ones, and then I bought the more expensive ones, and I actually find no difference between them other than they are physically a different size. I will say I think the cheaper ones are nicer in the sense that they're smaller. So if it is for a kid, I would go with that. Also, just like a little pro tip, if you have any like loop earplugs or something like that, what you can do is you can like steal the tiniest little bud thing from them to put on your noise canceling earbuds if they don't fit in your kid's ears. So just like use one from something else to make it smaller. All right, so the next question. Do you know of any medications like SSRIs or beta blockers that have been shown to help? There are currently no studies. What is suggested is if there is a co-occurring condition like depression, anxiety, OCD, etc., that a medical practitioner treat that, and often they do treat with medication. But as a counselor, I am not allowed to comment on medications. And even if the studies do come out and do exist, that would still have to be kind of a question for a medical practitioner. I can say from personal experience that treating my OCD has made misophonia easier because my baseline for anxiety is lower to start. So when I get triggered, I come down quicker. But that's also going to be very dependent on what co-occurring conditions exist and also what the doctor believes is best in that situation. So in these cases, the medication isn't necessarily for the misophonia. It's for other conditions that also exist. There was one study that was going to use antihistamines. There was one study that was going to use beta blockers, but unfortunately, they just kind of fell by the wayside and never actually happened. So we do not know in the case of misophonia at all. And as research goes on, I'm sure we will learn more things about the disorder and if there are any medications that can alleviate it. But right now, unfortunately, we are still in the dark ages. And I'm sorry for answering your question because my answer is basically, I don't know. But that is the reality, which is why coping skills, I think, are so important because there really isn't traditional medicine that can help yet. I do have hope that there eventually will be. I am totally on board with research and excited to see what happens. But as of this time, coping skills are really the only thing we have. You're welcome. And I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer for you, but all we have is the truth. Sorry for drinking. I'm parched. So, are there any more questions? Do I have a book published? I have several. The most recent one is Misophonia Matters, and that is also part of my coaching skills program, my therapy I do. It is on Amazon. I usually give the book free to people who do the class. So if you're interested in doing those in the future, you can get the PDF that way. But as for the actual book, it is on Amazon and other platforms, but Amazon is just so much easier to send a link. And basically this book I wrote for adults, teens, and clinicians. So it can be a bit of a thick read because I try to go as in-depth as I can, and I added as much research as I could. So I can provide like all the links of kind of resources. I'll just get it together. But for now, if you have any more specific questions, I am happy to answer. I'm also in the process of setting up a coping skills coaching group for teens. And that's going to be one where there'll be like a peer group and they can actually engage with other teens that have misophonia. So if any parents are interested in that, you can let me know and give me your email and I can let you know when that is available. There'll be like several start dates. And the idea of that is that it's teaching the coping skills, but it's also giving them that feeling that they are not alone. So I think a group will be great because there's not a lot of kids that have met other people with misophonia, especially, where it's such a rare new disorder. So I think that, a group would be a great way to help them. And it will, of course, be virtual, so it should be easier than an in-person classroom because a lot of times school can be really hard for people with misophonia. It was for myself. So, any questions? I'm just writing up the list of resources to give you guys too. Are there any other questions you have about like certain resources? So I'm just writing out this resource list. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. And feel free to ask multiple questions. It's not like you just get one. You can ask as many as you want. I'm just trying to, like, add whatever I can. Yeah, you tried play therapy, but it didn't help. Yeah, I think the thing about play therapy is that it's something that's, like, a good relief, but it's not, like, an actual way of understanding misophonia. I think it's something that might help in the moment, like, feel better in the moment. Yeah, exposure therapy is absolutely terrible, and I am completely against any practitioner that does exposure therapy. I think it is cruel, and I will scream that from the rooftops. I don't think play therapy itself would be harmful. I think, you know, it might be cool in the moment and help them calm down, but I don't think it would, like, help regularly. That's kind of the reason why my approach involves the sensory integration diet, because that is about regularly putting sensory skills in your life, regularly putting skills, like, when I say cognitive skills, I don't mean exposure, not at all. It's more having things to lean back on, like a comparison chart of which triggers are necessary, which aren't, negotiation charts, learning how to advocate for yourself, learning how to stand up for yourself and say, hey, this is hurting me, or as simple as identifying moments that you cannot leave and figuring out what works. So say your child is in class and there's a trigger, and maybe they have an accommodation set up that they could wear earplugs or earphones. Some children don't want to do that because they don't want to, you know, look different. And honestly, I was 22 and I had the same problem of not wanting to look different, but a lot of the work is, first of all, learning about misophonia, what it is, how it impacts the body, what parts of the body it impacts, and then getting into what skills can we learn, how can we implement these skills, how can we teach others about these skills and impress upon them the importance. And a lot of that comes down to the parents and practitioner too, like writing letters, getting accommodations, ensuring that, you know, needs are being met as best as possible. Some people I've seen in their teens, they're allowed to, like, go to a different resource room or read in the hallway. So it's really this eclectic, I'll say, like, a cornucopia of different things that each piece is important because it all comes together to make an environment that is the easiest for someone with misophonia to thrive in. Does that answer make sense? And on the exposure therapy thing, sensory information is cumulative, so exposure is just going to make it worse. Because a person with misophonia, when they are exposed to a trigger, what happens is, at first they feel the anxiety before they even hear the sound, and then the anxiety keeps building and building and building. It's like they're in a room with a snake. They can't take their eyes off the snake. Snake's still there. They still keep panicking, keep panicking, keep panicking, keep panicking. And it's very traumatizing because there's no point where the person with misophonia will suddenly be like, okay, I'm friends with the snake. They'll just keep going up, up, up until they're so exhausted that they'll have a shutdown or a meltdown. And their brains will just almost feel like they turned off. Or it might be honestly like a toddler having a tantrum on the floor because there's just nothing left in the tank. And I know that sounds aggressive, but even at 30, I still feel like a toddler wanting to have a tantrum on the ground. Can you get a diagnosis? Yes and no. Some professionals will write it down. Some won't. It's not in the DSM or the ISD or ICD. So that's why we have a petition to get it in there to try and make diagnosis more accessible. Many practitioners will just like write letters of support for accommodations, and they'll like write generalized anxiety, or audiologists will like put non-descriptive things. So practitioners are kind of like fighting their way around insurance company and ADA laws. I'm in Canada, so it's not so hard to get accommodation. But that's one of those things where, unfortunately, whether or not a practitioner even says you have misophonia, whether or not you know there's misophonia, there's no insurance code for, the US, and there's no diagnostic manual that it exists in, so it's really hard to call something a diagnosis, which is why, as I said, this petition is so important to me. You're welcome. I'm sorry I can't have more like, yeah, you can get a diagnosis, it's great, but I think we'll get there. I do think we will get there. It's just going to take a lot of time. And yeah, I'm free to answer more questions for a while. I don't really have any other plans. So as long as people want to ask them, I am here. And can you guys let me know if you'd like these more regularly, if you like having the opportunity to just ask whatever you want? Because I was thinking about doing this more regularly. But I'm still building that resource link list. Anything I can think of. So, any more questions? So if anyone does have interest in the group sessions for teens and preteens, I am going to make it ages 11 to 17. I think that that's a good age range together. I don't think there'll be anything too crazy between that. And the plan is to have these groups probably starting in September, and they'll be like once a week at a set time. And it's designed that you cannot miss a session because it's a group activity, and there'll be activities for engaging together. It'll be 8 sessions total. I don't have all the details yet, but if that is something you're interested in, I can definitely give you kind of more information on that wait list. You're welcome. Thank you for thanking me. And, you know, as much as I hate knowing that misophonia exists, I'm glad that, you know, there's coping skills and that we can come together kind of as communities and be empathetic with each other, and then, you know, kind of let that spread and teach more people about the disorder who might not know it before. And one thing I think is really powerful is that each person you teach in your life about misophonia will probably be more kind to the next person, whether it's an aunt, a cousin. So these things really do kind of roll over into more understanding over time. I went to a birthday party for my father, and there were like hundreds of people there, and I was terrified to go. But 10 years ago, if I had went to a party in this little rural town in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and said, hey, I have a sensory disorder, sorry, I'm really upset, everyone would look at me like I have 2 heads. But I actually did this several times, and my response was, usually the response I got from people was, oh, sorry, how do I help you? And I was just blown away by how much understanding and kindness there was, because there was a point where that just wasn't happening, and now it's completely different. My father, who didn't understand before, is now more compassionate. He'll tell me before there's a trigger. Even he's made an effort. So I will say that things have gotten better just in the last 10 years, which to me isn't just exciting, it's helped me to live my life. So that is very powerful. So does anyone have any other questions? And feel free to ask more personal questions about me and my misophonia. I don't mind answering them. I've probably already said it all in a book or an article somewhere. Not that I want to rant about myself, but I am an open book if anyone has questions. So I am just getting those resources ready to copy and paste. And I do suggest that you copy and paste them from your chat, because I'm not sure if the live stream will remain showing the chat afterwards. Some platforms it will, some it won't. So I do suggest copying and pasting that list. I can also email it out or post it on social media. Totally cool with that too. And I will say that unfortunately, no matter how much awareness and advocacy there is, there will always be some people that don't understand. And I want to tell you, like, don't beat yourself up over that. There's even conditions like depression and OCD and anxiety that have been around forever that some people just don't get it. And that's unfortunate, but that's not anything you're doing wrong. And if you're a parent with a kid with misophonia, you know, you're not coddling them by quote unquote giving in to their demands. No one made this up to try and control the family. And I think you should give yourself some grace, because it's very hard to live with someone with misophonia. And my parents have told me as much. My dad said to my husband, "Thank you for putting up with her. She's hard to live with." He was saying it as a joke, but it's also true. And I think it's important to remember that this isn't an easy condition, and I am sure you are all doing your best. You're seeking information, you're accepting your child and this disorder, and you're trying to do what you can for them. And I think that's something that you should really feel happy and proud about, that you're interested in learning more, that you're trying to help them do better. And I think if there's some days that it feels like, you know, you're not getting anywhere, that you should really sit back and realize that you are doing a lot, and this isn't easy. So I do commend you all for doing your best. I'm sorry if that's like too motivational and sappy, but I do think it's important to remind parents that since there's so little evidence, the amount of work that you're putting in just to get information is really commendable, in my opinion. And I do have a question from elsewhere that I'm going to read. I'm not going to say the name. The child is reactive to her father to the point he can't breathe around her. What can we do to ease the tension? We tiptoe as much as we can, but it continues to worsen. All right, so fathers seem to always be the ones that are the hardest to deal with for people. Myself included. I guess I would suggest psychoeducation for the whole family. For him, for the child, for you, so that everybody is on the same page and understands that it's about the trigger, it's not about the relationship. And sometimes I think both the parent and the child can become more reactive, and then it kind of becomes this endless cycle of anger and resentment, and, you know, that's not healthy. So I think psychoeducation is also important for the parent. And family systems theory by Julie Bowen basically says that if one person changes in the family, they all change. So even if your child can't, you know, learn to cope better, maybe your husband could, or you could learn how to diffuse the situation. So it's really about understanding what the trigger is, how it can be dealt with. Breathing is a very hard one because obviously you cannot stop breathing. But there is potential that by learning sensory integration skills and learning other coping skills, that maybe, you know, you can take that reactivity down from 100 to 70, and then maybe it's not a complete blowout every time they hear one trigger. So it's kind of trying to overall reduce the stress and then hopefully come to a place where there's more understanding. Not that I'm saying your husband doesn't understand, but that each person in the family, instead of being reactive, you can be proactive, where you have plans in place, you've had family discussions, you have family rules around it. Whereas, you know, the child, of course, is allowed to be triggered, and you can say, okay, you can go do this coping skill, go put earphones on, go to another room and do X, Y, Z. but obviously dad has to breathe. So you can have rules and boundaries and say, you know what, you can't freak out at dad for breathing. You can go do something else. So learning coping skills and implementing them at the time, and also having boundaries where, you know, you still can't freak out and get super angry at people, because that's not nice. And sometimes it does happen where even if they don't mean it, the person triggered will say something mean in the moment. I've done it myself, and I'm a grown-up. But I think a really important boundary to have in these situations is apologies. I think that anytime there's a blow-up on either side, whether it's the parent or the child, that there needs to be an apology, because I think we need to firmly establish that yes, the misophonia is bad, but we still have to have these relationships, and we need to not have misophonia interfere with that. Did that help? And to the other chat members, I'm just answering in a different chat box, so that's why you can't see it. All right, are there any more questions? I'm happy to answer some more. And I'm happy to answer a few more questions. I think it's been about an hour or so because I did come on late. This is an hour and 12 minutes. So I am happy to answer a few more questions and then give the list of resources. I was just reading the follow-up there. It's been difficult for him to get his head around it. Yeah, I think it was hard for my dad, too, to suddenly be yelled at all the time. I was actually, like, 19 when I found out I had misophonia, so I was a bit older. So, it was weird. But we did come to a place where he learned more about the condition, and I learned to stop being as mean about it. Which, you know, I think it's important in any relationship that there's give and take, and both people have to be willing to work with the situation they have. And I'm happy to answer more questions on pretty much anything misophonia related, so long as I have the answer, of course. Becoming more reactive to other people. Yeah. I think there's also like a time where misophonia can feel really hopeless for a while. And it's not because it's gotten worse or better. It's because there's just times where you're dealing with other things. It could even be hormones or, just a bad day, stress from other things in your life. And, misophonia waxes and wanes. And, yeah, the parents are the worst triggers in this situation. Well, I will say, of course you are, because you're the people that you spend the most time with. So, since people don't adapt to their triggers, of course she's going to, stay reactive to you both because she's exposed the most, and exposure makes it worse. And, that is very unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to get way worse. I think it will hit kind of a plateau, because things usually do. And it could be that there's like some other anger there, that just angry that she has this, angry that it exists. I get that way. That's why a lot of the skills I teach are about, learning how to manage that anger and be better in the non-misophonia moments, or learn how to cope when it gets really bad. But relationships with parents, I will say, almost all teenagers and preteens have issues with their parents. I'm sure you remember when you were a teenager that you had the same thing going on. So try to separate the misophonia for a minute and remember that you're dealing with a growing person who is going through so many biological and neurological changes, and teenagers aren't known for being the most emotionally regulated anyway. So try to remember that when you're dealing with a teenager. So try not to worry as much, because the teen years are just really hard, misophonia or not. So, I think it will level out over time. Teen years are just hard. And I think it's okay to recognize that it's hard. And also it's okay to, just sort of be like, okay, just put your earphones in and go away sometimes. Like, if you don't want to be with us, if you're just going to argue, the same as, a teenager who would have been depressed or anxious, sometimes it's okay to tell them, you know what, just go have your own space and just calm down. So, are there any more questions? And yeah, the summary I have for parents of teenagers and preteens is, it's a hard life stage no matter what. Probably, at least that I've experienced thus far, from childhood to 30, it was the worst for me. I certainly wouldn't want to go back. Not for all the money in the world. And I didn't even have misophonia as a teenager, like not until 19. So for me, it was depression, anxiety, OCD, and without the misophonia, it was hard. So that's why I'm trying to kind of remind parents that, you are still dealing with a preteen or teenager misophonia or not. So does anyone have some more questions before I send out resources? I'm glad to hear that you guys are good at forgiving. That's a huge part of all of this. And I'm just finalizing this little resource list summary. And thank you guys for coming to chat today. Do you think we should do these more often? Like, is there any interest in that? Obviously, like, just free little check-ins. Okay, so I'm getting some feedback that people would like it. And I'd be happy to do this more often. I don't know if I can, like, schedule them far in advance. I'll probably have to, like, try to fit them in where I can. Also, my misophonia gets really bad. So I won't do one, like, on a day where there's lawnmowers because I'm just hiding off in a corner and I don't want anybody in these streams to be triggered either. So I try to mitigate that as much as I can. I mean, I wouldn't be able to hear it from these earbuds, but you guys would. I'm actually starting to get hot because I turned off my air conditioner because it was like buzzing in the mic, and I'm trying to reduce triggers as much as I can. So if you do have misophonia or, you know, have your kid with misophonia watching, I'm trying to keep it as trigger free as possible, which is hard, but, you know, I do my best. Mostly because I know how hard it is. Sorry, I'm just getting this resource list ready. Sometimes it's even hard to remember how many resources we have, which is a good thing. I'm also like interested in doing more webinars through the foundation in the future. They will probably be paid just kind of so that the foundation can keep up with expenses. But I was thinking of even like bringing in some experts. And if anyone has any ideas on things they'd like to see presentations on specifically, please let me know. Unfortunately, the back to school webinar had to be canceled just due to scheduling conflicts. So my apologies for anyone that wanted to attend that. But we are kind of thinking of more topics, so if you have any ideas or things you would want to see, please do let me know, and you can always reach out to Shaylynn at misophoniafoundation.com. I'll just put that there. And I do have another book coming out probably in the next few months that is more written for the general public. It is very similar to Misophonia Matters, but I wanted to make it more accessible to teens and to like just general public who maybe doesn't want as much as the clinical side. So I'm excited for that. I'm thinking it'll come out in September. It's with the editor now, so we shall see. And I'm kind of excited for it, but also it does feel like it's very similar to the other book, just for a different audience. So if you have read or are going to read Misophonia Matters, I don't suggest reading this one. And I'm very honest with people. Like, I'm not trying to just sell you everything under the table. Like, I want people to very clearly know that this is a similar book, just for a different audience, so that there's no confusion and someone doesn't buy it and say, oh, I already read all this. Like, I don't want to do that to people. I've always joked that if making money was the goal, I would not do it with misophonia. I would find something way more popular. Because we're kind of off in the shadows where no one even knows we exist. Alright, so I seem to have the last of the resources ready. I was mostly just making the waitlist page, like physically making the website page as we were talking. Because I realized that one didn't exist yet, so now it does. Does anyone else have any questions? I do want to finish up soon because it's been an hour and a half, but I am willing to answer a few more questions. Oh, no need to be sorry. We'll still be here for a little bit if you want to ask some questions. No one. There is currently no diagnosis, unfortunately. Misophonia is not in the DSM or the ICD. Many practitioners use an off diagnosis such as anxiety or generalized auditory problems. Some might use more indirect language, but there, in most countries at least, is no diagnosis for misophonia because it's not in a manual, which is why we are doing a petition to get misophonia in the next DSM and the next ICD. It was a bit of back and forth and worry on my part about whether or not misophonia belongs in the DSM, but because there's conditions like autism and ADHD, I think there's enough other neurodivergent conditions in there that it can be in the DSM without being confused for psychological. And yeah, I also have migraines, and the migraines are gone, but the misophonia is still here. I do think that misophonia is worse for me when I have a migraine because I do not want to hear a single sound. But I do think they are separate conditions, and the current literature on misophonia has agreed that misophonia is a distinct condition that should be considered a disorder. But there has yet to be an acceptance of misophonia in any diagnostic manual. I feel like that was like a bunch of words. And yeah, I do think misophonia can be worse if you have a bunch of conditions, but that they're not necessarily the same condition or causing it. And yeah, I'm not super in love with the DSM, but in the world we live in, most clinicians use the DSM. So misophonia being in the DSM, I think, will help the most people. And feel free for anyone to ask more questions. I'm willing to stay for a little while longer. I mean, I do have some serious plans to go play The Sims again and Builders of Greece, but I can let The Sims go for a little bit. Yeah. I am very, very, very concerned about people assuming misophonia is only psychological. That's why the International Misophonia Foundation provides literature on this. Sorry. It's also why we're doing our own research studies, because we really want to have a space that is from the sufferer perspective, and we have our own research journal where people with misophonia are involved in the process of what research gets in. And I think that's very important, because a lot of research journals just don't know what misophonia is, so they don't really check their facts or their sources because they don't care. And it's very unfortunate, but most of the peer reviewers have no idea what these people are talking about, so they just accept it. And whatever. I can't rant about that because it just makes me really mad. I think that there's not enough ethics in research, and that most of it's a money mill, but I digress. Sorry for the rant. I'm always too honest. Yeah. I think the main problem with research is that someone has to pay for it. So researchers have to do research on things people are willing to give them money for. And unfortunately, it's not the researcher's fault. They can only really do what they can do. So it's not just the researcher's problems. It's really hard to get funding for conditions like this. So a lot of the psychiatric stuff, they have more funding because a lot of them are at big universities, and OCD researchers have a lot of money. They have a lot of funding, so they can just pump out studies left and right because, these are tenured professors with salary. They can put out 40 papers in a year and just have a grad student do most of the work. And that's what gets us to where we are. But unfortunately, they're the ones with the money, which is another reason why we started a nonprofit, for obvious reasons. So that's kind of my little rant of the day. And I'm sorry for getting a little ranty. I've been an advocate for a long time, 10 years. I've seen a lot. I disagree with a lot of how things have gone down. I'm more careful now that I'm a clinician because I don't want to, come off as aggressive. But I do still think that it's important to fight for ethical conditions and ethical research. And I mean, the researchers I'm specifically talking about came out with a study that said that misophonia should not be accommodated. And that is absolutely the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. So at a certain point, you have to, have your values above staying silent. And I think when it comes to misophonia, I think it's very important to have advocacy, because without advocacy, the world won't really learn what's going on. Oh, you were a speech therapist. Man, that must have been a tough job. And I'm sorry to hear that you got sick. I hope you do better, and I hope that things improve for you. And thank you for coming on this stream. I'm happy to have you here. Happy to be here. Do you think you'll ever go back to that job, or is that kind of something in the past for you? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And I do want to say, if anyone is interested in ever volunteering for the IMF, we are always looking for people to do a myriad of things. This is really a community effort. There's always more that can be done. I feel like I could work 40 hours in a day and still want to do more for misophonia. And I know there aren't 40 hours in a day, but if there were, I'd use them. And I guess I'm so passionate about this because I know how I have struggled, and I don't want people to continue struggling with this forever and ever, because, you know, it's hard, and we deserve happiness, we deserve comfort, we deserve to be able to have accommodations with our families, and, you know, I guess live fulfilling lives without misophonia feeling like a cloud over our heads, because sometimes it can. And I think a big part of that is, you know, the public understanding, and that if you say to someone, hey, could you please stop doing this because of this reason, that people will respond positively. A few weeks ago. Oh my god. It's been 10 years for me. A very long 10 years. So I have a question for you. Since you only recently realized you have misophonia, how were you coping? Like, what were you doing to try and cope before you knew what it was? And I don't necessarily know if they are related or not. I haven't been diagnosed, but I do believe that I'm having some issues like that as well. So maybe there is a connection. I can't say either way. But of course, there are many men with misophonia, so even if there is a connection, it would have to be, you know, only in one side of the population. So it might just be a coincidence that some people have both. We honestly don't know. There's never been a study. How was your family with that? Were they, like, reacting well, or were they confused? I'm always curious to hear other people's opinions. Because, you know, each person has their own individual lifestyle and experiences, and I don't think any one person's is more important than another, and I don't want to be here and like preach to you that this is what you do, this is what you do. Okay, so your dad was good, your mom thinks it's a burden. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. My mother was actually one of my first triggers. It was the foot jiggling. I'm not sure if you've heard of misokinesia. They are probably the same condition, but again, we do not have the research. Misokinesia would be a visual trigger reaction. So for me, like foot jiggling, legs going up and down, anything swaying, I had to leave school because of the misokinesia. I could have dealt with the sounds. Like, I could have wore earplugs or something for sounds, but the visuals, I could not. Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate that. It actually does mean so much to me, because sometimes I feel like I'm just screaming off into a void. Alright, so I created 2 pages. One is the wait list for the teen groups, and the other is a form that is like stream feedback. And if you put your email in the stream feedback, I will email you the list of resources so that you don't have to worry about kind of tracking them down or saving the comments, because I know a lot of devices make that hard. Oh, your dad chews gum? Oh my god. Gum is completely banned in my house. Like, gum is an absolute, you will not do this around me or I will leave. Same as whistling. Absolute no. I'm not proud of this, but my dad whistled, like, at the dog when I was home one time. They live 6 hours away. And he didn't even, like, do it just casually. The dog was actually running away, and they have a big farmland, so he had to whistle at the dog. I barreled down the stairs, ran outside, and just started screaming at him. I'm like, what are you doing? You know you can't whistle around me. I will go back home. I will leave. And I feel ashamed. 30-year-old woman just yelling so loudly. Luckily, they live in the middle of nowhere. And he just kind of, like, shrugged and he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And we were fine after that, luckily, but I do not handle whistling well. So, as part of the Misophonia Matters coping skills, the either coaching or therapy or class, I have this chart. And it's about negotiations with family. And there's one thing, like one side of things people can't, like, stop doing, like breathing, sneezing, etc. And then the other side is things people can stop doing. You don't have to whistle. You don't have to chew gum. You will not, die if you don't. They do have to eat. So I think a lot of negotiations are also about trying to come to reasonable accommodations. And unfortunately, not everyone wants to be reasonable, but I will say I cannot be around gum chewers or whistling, so I am very sorry for you. That would really, really suck. You tried to negotiate at work? How did that go? And I'm sorry if it didn't go well, and since you said tried, I'm assuming it didn't go great. Most are helpful, okay. I think most people don't want to hurt other people, like most don't want to be rude, but a huge thing I've found is that some people feel attacked. Like you are slighting them and like you are commenting on their entire being because you asked them not to click a pen. You might as well have told them that you hate them and that they're awful. Like, some people internalize these triggers so much. I've noticed family members will. Pen clicking is so unnecessary and so horrible. The irony of fidget spinners is that they can be helpful for people with misophonia, but if someone else is using it, you'll be triggered. Do earplugs help? I love earplugs. I'm wearing noise canceling earbuds right now. These ones were like $70. Alright, there are so many things going on in the chat, but I want to answer everything. As for the earplugs, the silicone ones I find are the best. Like, I can't hear my heartbeat in them. They're soft. They're not as aggressive. I wear those and then white noise really loud in the room. And, like, we are talking volume 10 on this huge She Who Must Not Be Named blaring. I was sleeping at my uncle's one time and he walks in the room and he's like, what is that, an airplane? So I use silicone earplugs. Very loud white noise. I've been using this weighted eye mask and sometimes I sleep with a pillow over my head too. So if I could sleep in a sensory chamber, I would. As for earplugs, I say see what you like. If you don't want full noise coverage and you still want to hear things, loop would be good. I hate them because I want to block out every noise possible in the world, but these do not, so they could be a good in-between for you. Oh yeah, I have, I actually use pink noise. I call it white noise, but it's actually pink because it's like mountain rain. As for parents and people who react as though you're slighting them, I think that's a lot where advocacy comes in and psychoeducation and teaching them about the disorder and providing them with resources. Which is one reason that whenever anybody takes my coaching class or therapy, if you're in Canada, anything like that, I always take the 1 hour video and I say, please share this with your family. Try to get them to watch it. And oh my God, Rachel, I am so sorry. That is awful. Do you have a practitioner who could, write you an accommodation letter? Like someone who is available to do that? Without giving too much information, Rachel, where are you located? Like, US based? Well, I'm glad everyone else is good about it. Okay, so you do have accommodations. Have you talked to HR about the fact that the director is just not... Like, are they just refusing to talk about it, or are they refusing to accommodate it at all? Okay. Is there any possibility that you can, like, get an accommodation to have your own office or something? But, like, you just don't have to be near them? Yeah, I mean, there's a good likelihood that maybe she has some anxiety and she just feels like she's being bullied. I'm not saying you're doing that. But, unfortunately, what we see a lot is people... Okay, so you're a nurse. Would it be possible to provide this girl with psychoeducation? Like, resources on misophonia, just to kind of explain that you're not hating on her? Okay, well, in the case of someone not caring, I guess, like, gently remind them not to do things that trigger you. Gently remind them that you have an HR note. Sorry for clapping, I didn't mean to. And try to avoid her as best you can. That would be my advice, because at this point, it's not a misophonia issue. It's a stubborn coworker issue. And those are hard in the best of times. I will say, even if it weren't misophonia, like, there are coworkers that refuse to accommodate for a myriad of conditions. Or replace every single pen in the entire hospital with ones that don't click. Throw all the caps away. This is good advice, right? Ban clickable pens. That's my next petition. Anyone want to sign? Honestly, you know what we should do? Oh, it's not a pen? What is the trigger? I'm sorry to ask, like, what does she do that triggers you? So then we can come up with an unreasonable solution. What? Why? There are just some people that want to be annoying. That's like the nurse equivalent of having a muffler on your car to make it louder on purpose. I'm sorry. Yeah, people like that. See, I had supervision earlier for being a therapist, and my therapist takes off her earrings because she knows they bother me. So, like, not everybody is awful. Also, if she's a nurse, why is she not empathetic? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but, like, healthcare providers should be the most empathetic among us. But, yeah, I'm sorry you're going through that, Rachel. I went through something even... I'm going to tell a story. And this, to me, is pretty bad because it involves family. So, one of my visual triggers is those spinning garden wheels with all the color. Like, I want to just throw up thinking about it. My aunt and uncle had one on top of their pool. And they were gone away. And I messaged my aunt, and I wanted to just use my pool, which was next door. They lived in the house that I grew up in as a child. My dad sold it to them and for some reason moved next door. I'm like, if you're going to sell the house, at least move more than 10 feet. But anyway, I text my aunt, whom I used to be very close with. And I say, hey, can you just remove this pinwheel? And I get a text back, I'd rather not. And I'm just, like, trying to explain how much it hurts and how awful it is, and they're just not hearing it. And then my dad ended up going over and yelling at his brother, and the pinwheel was taken down. And then 2 days later, they put another one up, and my uncle was in the yard revving bikes and every single old motor that he owned. Just standing there, revving the bike over and over for an hour. Oh, I'm not even going to say that I would do that because that would be wrong, but you do what you got to do. See, I think in the first place, my first instinct was to just take the pinwheel and burn it and tell nobody. And I honestly should have went with my first instinct because they would have never known it was me and I could have just kept taking them and burning them. But instead, it became a colossal fight. And I ended up moving because of this fight. I moved 5 hours away and then met my husband, and I'm much happier than they are, so. I'm sorry. I'm getting super petty on this stream. I'm a good therapist, I swear. I have no pettiness. I have no flaws. Don't steal. Don't steal. Don't do it. Honestly, though, what is the point of wind chimes or, like, whistling in public other than telling people, hi, I'm annoying? Like, I don't understand the point. Like, what is it? What is it about a person that's like, hey, you know, it'd be better if my house rattled and sounded like clanking metal every time I walked by it? And, like, the people that whistle in public, I honestly want to, like, make commercials for TV to tell old men, stop whistling. I don't think they'd listen. I think they'd do it more. But, like, I don't understand the purpose of whistling. Like, even if I didn't have misophonia, what is the purpose other than being like, hi, I'm here, look at me? Or, like, jingling the change in your pocket? I guess they find it soothing. I should, like, think of this from a therapeutic standpoint, that they're just trying to self-soothe themselves, use sensory regulation. But my God, buy a stress ball. I just... Yeah, like, you know how, like, you'll be in public and the change, they'll just be, like, their hand in their pocket and they're just, like, so aggressive with it? Really? At the Misophonia conference? Were they, like, a researcher or something? Yeah, like, get these old men some Play-Doh. Oh, keys. Or people who have, like, 90 jillion keys and they, like, wear them on their belt and they, like, smack the entire time they walk. This is why I stay inside. Honestly. I just Instacart everything and stay in my house. And even then, I'm triggered all the time. Because I live in army housing and they mow, like, 20 times a week. And it's these big industrial mowers. And lawnmowers are a huge trigger for me. I'm honestly just waiting for winter at this point. Can we all just, like, hibernate? Oh, it probably wasn't an experiment. They probably just didn't care. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to be swaying back and forth. If that's a trigger, I'm so sorry. Oh, you had to go to a grocery store? No. That's what Instacart is for. The only way I enjoy shopping is, like, if I'm alone, no one's with me, I have my noise-canceling earbuds in, and I just, like, do my own thing. Like, at the dollar store or TJ Maxx, Winners. TJ Maxx owns the Canadian store Winners, so it's basically the same thing. Like, it has to be a store I enjoy. The grocery store, like, not a chance. You can't pay me to go in there. They're the worst places on earth. Oh, yeah, heat kills me too. I honestly think a lot of people with sensory processing issues have trouble with temperature. Like, I've had my air conditioner off this entire time, and I'm not enjoying this. But I turned it off for you guys, so you're welcome. Oh my God, you went at 4 p.m.? I'm so sorry. I do have a question. Like, do you guys like this format where we have, like, the background overlay, the chat on screen? I made it myself, by the way. I've actually been streaming The Sims a lot, but without sound. I was thinking about, like, doing streams where I talk about, like, mental health and misophonia while gaming. Would that be weird? And Christy, I'll answer your question in, like, 2 seconds. I don't know if it'd be weird to, like, stream while gaming, because I find Sims so relaxing, so I wonder if, like, even just watching it on screen would be relaxing. I don't use sound in the game, though, like, not a chance. As for the nervous system and heat and sensory regulation, absolutely. That would be interoception, and that is our brain and body being able to communicate with each other. Button clicking? Oh, girl, no. I don't own a mouse that button clicks. I'm clicking it right up to the thing. Can you hear that? I only own silent mice. Husband's not allowed to own a non-silent mice. My keyboard is pretty much as silent as you can get. It's a chiclet. Oh my god. I spent like $70 on silent gaming mice for my husband. And gaming mice don't last long. So I've had to replace it for like 4 times now. So I just keep buying $70 mice. Because this is the only one on the market that's both a gaming mouse and silent. And it's like, this is worth all the money. I don't care. Okay, where can you get these mice? This one's just a Logitech one. It's an M22 one. That's their color one. And I think the M2020 is their, like, black ones. Oh, he's amazing. Like, absolutely amazing. He's also a soldier, so he's really good at taking orders. That's a joke. I don't boss him around. But, yeah. We met on Tinder, like, 5 years ago. And I told him about misophonia before we ever met in public, so he was totally prepared beforehand. He told me that when he read in my profile that I had misophonia, his first thought was, oh good, she hates people too. So, we're very compatible. Alright, I can also, like, get you Amazon links for the silent mice. And that gaming one, that's the only one that exists. Can you guys hear me typing? Because I have been typing during this. Like, a lot. I am super curious, though, like, if you can hear it. Is it, like, super loud, or is it kind of low? Okay. Is it super triggering? Because I can stop. Yeah, I, like, only use these chiclet keyboards because they're the softest that exist. But, they also break really easily, so I go through, like, 2 keyboards a year. Whatever. Okay. I need to close the curtain. I was using the sun to make the cam brighter, but now I just can't see, so we're going blurry. And yeah, like, the very start of this stream, I spilled, like, I don't know, half a liter of Mio water that's pink all over my keyboard and desk. I cleaned most of it up, but I'm still, like, in the process of being drenched in pink liquid. So this stream started off fun. And it was, like, literally the second I started. No, we do not. And that will not be changing. I'm a cat person. I have 4 of them. And they are what make me happy. Also, I'm not gonna lie, the idea of passing misophonia onto a kid, I can't do it. But I didn't want kids before I knew I had misophonia. So. Oh, I'm sorry that your kids trigger you. You are not the first parent to tell me that. So don't feel bad. Don't feel like, you know, you're a bad mom or anything. I mean, one thing I will tell you, Rachel, is getting coping skills in their lives early makes all the difference, because then they have the strategies as they grow and learn and as they develop. So the younger you identify any sensitivities, the better. Honestly, it's us adults that have more trouble because we've already learned all our bad habits and we gotta unlearn it all. Honestly, it could be both, Rachel. And like I said, a family systems approach can be really good for that. Genograms are great to kind of tell which person in the family has what. That would be what I would suggest, you know, if you have a practitioner or, you know, someone who's going to do coping skills with you. Just like for an example, if I were working with your kids, even if they're young, what I would first suggest is explaining to both what misophonia is, like the psychoeducation at their age levels, and then moving on to negotiations of what's, you know, good, what's bad. Like, you can't hit your brother, you can't yell at your brother, you know what I mean? Like, things like that. And then move on to the children themselves learning to negotiate what is good and what is bad. And, like, you know, throwing the autonomy in there instead of just, like, being like, hey, I'm your parent, so you do this. I think the autonomy is a huge part of it because, you know, kids are going to fight. But I think helping them understand that the child with misophonia isn't just trying to control them or be mean, stuff like that. I think that's important. I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe you could figure out a way that he could, like, do something else, negotiate with him something less annoying, the more fun. I don't know if that's possible. And I honestly think, like, the hardest, the people that have the hardest time accommodating misophonia, in my experience, it always comes back to, why are you mad at me? Why are you singling me out? Why are you attacking me? Even if you're not, like, you could be just very simply trying to explain the disorder, and the other person will just feel attacked, and that is unfortunate, but that's why I think psychoeducation is important if possible. One thing I would suggest for, like, a work environment would be, like, if you could convince, you know, your boss to let there be, like, an information workshop or something for everybody to learn about misophonia that is not, you know, singling out this one person. I mean, I don't know how reasonable that would be, but it could work if everybody were on board. I should honestly think about offering that through the foundation to let companies use these webinars in the workplace. I had never thought about that before. Okay, would there be any possibility or interest in maybe, like, having a pre-recording that could be played? I'm kind of thinking more misophonia based. Because this is definitely something that the IMF can look into offering. And obviously by the IMF, I mean me, because I'm the one that pre-recorded the class. Sorry if you saw that. It was a key popping off. My keyboard's going haywire after the incident earlier, I might have killed my first keyboard of the year. Which kind of sucks. Okay, is there any reason why they didn't want to single it out? Because, honestly, you can't really provide psychoeducation by just talking about a bunch of general disorders, in my opinion. Also, what does diabetes have to do with autism and ADHD? I'm very confused. I mean, it sounds like, you know, an effort was made and they did try, but... Okay, yeah, she included misophonia, but, like, what did she include? How did she explain it? Sorry for asking so many questions. I'm just genuinely curious. Okay, yeah. Other than that one person, yeah, so it did go well. I'm glad to hear that. I'm sorry that the other person wasn't there. Have you asked her about potentially doing it again when that coworker's there, like ensuring that they're on shift? Like, I know that might be hard to arrange, but I'm curious if that's possible. But this is giving me ideas that there needs to be more workplace education. Yeah, but, like, you can ensure that someone's working and give a presentation the day they're working without telling them that they have to be there. You can just make it mandatory for everybody. I don't know, it sounds like there's a lot of tiptoeing around this coworker. Which, I don't know why. Like, maybe the coworker has gone to them and said that they feel... Oh, wow. That seems like a strange thing to say, because at this point, like, this relationship seems pretty bad. Honestly, my main question is there any way you can ask them to just never schedule you at the same time? Or have as little overlap as possible? So that'd be my first question. Is there any way that you can just make it that you barely have to see her? Yeah, you've looked at other jobs. Is there any way to get that accommodation in the job you currently have, or is that something that they refuse to explore? Okay, so they're working on it. So I guess try to be, like, positive about it, but don't give up, because I really do think this is something that, you know, you should be allowed to ask for. If they're not going to be accommodating, you can at least, you know, get away from her. I will say don't focus on all of that, because, you know, then it just sounds like you're kind of, you have a grudge against each other. So don't try to focus on anything other than what specifically impacts you, because you don't want them to kind of think that they're just getting in the middle of a feud or something. So I would just caution you to let her work ethic speak for itself. Let them figure that out on their own. But just make it about what impacts you. Because at the end of the day, the goal here isn't, you know, to start a war with this girl. It's just to cope better. I hope that is helpful. And I'm sorry that we're asking so many questions. Oh my god. There is literally juice inside the battery compartment of my keyboard. This is great. This is great. Yeah, I am thinking about ways that we can like start providing workplace education. Maybe there could be pre-recorded presentations and then companies can pay like a small fee to access it and give the presentation as a video. Obviously the fee would be because, you know, every single time we offer things, unfortunately, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy, and we gotta keep the lights on. But hopefully as we grow, we'll be able to provide more things. Do nurses get CEUs? Alright, so that is also something to think about, especially since everybody wants to get their CEUs. So, I mean, a big thing would be people with misophonia would kind of have to tell their workplace about it and ask them to do it, because I don't think most workplaces would do it on their own. Sorry about that entering weird stuff. My keyboard was being absolutely awful after pouring things on it. But yeah, workplace-based CEUs. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think it's a good idea. And I want to thank you for that idea because, you know, we're always coming up with new things to do, and we can't really come up with them unless people kind of show us the need. Also, my only co-workers are my cats, and I can't negotiate with them. They're gonna do whatever they want. I think my keyboard might be broken. Oh, how wonderful. Whatever, I'll just buy a new one. If you only knew how common this was for me. I guess you do, because I told you. Can you guys still hear me, or am I frozen? That's weird, my chat just totally restarted. All right, I want to send out the list of resources since we're finishing up. I also put there, the first thing is a feedback form. And for that, if you fill that out, I'll just like email you all the resources so that you don't have to worry about copying and pasting them, so that you can privately put your email into the form there. But since I now have a broken keyboard and a room full of red juice, I think it might be time to, finish up. It's been 2 hours and 20 minutes. I planned to do an hour, but I did way longer. And I'm totally okay with that. I hope this has been helpful for people. I personally enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting, new ideas about workplace education and more ways to provide education for misophonia. And if anyone has any questions about any of those links, feel free to ask through the feedback form or my email, which is at the end. And I do offer a coping skills program worldwide and counseling in Canada. The coping program is like a coaching skills program based on Misophonia Matters. It's similar to the therapy, but like less therapy wise. So that is basically all I really have to say. If you are interested in any of the coaching stuff or the class, you can just click the link or let me know through email and I will get back to you. And if you fill out that first stream feedback, I will email you all of these resources. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I am going to stop the stream now. And thank you so much for coming.